This is a response to Dan's last response in our ongoing exchange, and this is actually part one of a two-part response. Since I can't fit everything into 10 minutes, I plan on uploading part two of this right after this, so feel free to go ahead and watch that after you finish this one. So we start out regarding Papias. Dan says that his point is that we can't confidently connect the text Papias refers to as the Gospel of Mark as we have it today. Now, I don't have much trouble with Dan's claim here, as my reference to Papias was in order to support that the Gospel of Mark, as we have it today, had Peter as a source, and I was never implying that Papias was referring to Mark as we have it today, so I think we can move on. Next, we have my citation of F.H. Coulson, which Dan says is, quote, a 100-year-old paper that I do not care about, end quote. I want to make two comments here. First, just because the paper is old does not mean the ideas or arguments are wrong. To disregard the paper due to its age is to be guilty of chronological snobbery. Second, simply saying I don't care about a paper that undercuts your point does not serve as a refutation. Second, Dan references Bauckham in objection to Coulson's argument that order in Papias is referring to literary arrangement and not to chronological order, and he does this by saying that the first thing on the list of literary aesthetics was chronological order. But Dan, just because chronological order is the first thing to look for on the list does not mean it's the only thing on that list. It's not as if the rhetorical schools looked at works and said, yep, it's in chronological order, that's all that's needed, it's good to go. There was a range of criteria, and even if Mark meets the criteria of chronological order, his work could still be called unordered by the other factors that were important to the rhetorical schools. Coulson notes that Mark's work could be objected to on the grounds of his abrupt beginning that lacks a lineage of the main character, his incomplete ending that seems to cut off in the middle of the narrative, his habit of emphasizing trivial points and occasionally dealing inadequately with important ones, the comparative absence of set speeches, and Mark's inferior grouping. Mark's chronological order does not negate his rhetorical failings on other grounds, which would provoke the rhetorical schools to call it unordered. Dan has simply failed to address the issue here. Next, Dan critiques my reference of Lacona and Pelletier by saying that the work was never published and that these are not critical scholars. Regarding this first issue, my question for Dan is, can you provide any published surveys on the positions of critical scholars regarding this issue? If you have some, I'm welcome to hear it. I think it's ironic that Dan objects to my point by saying that this data has not been published when Dan continually asserts that critical scholarship consensus supports his point. Yet Dan provides no published data to support his claim. I mean, at the very least, the claim made by Lacona is made in a published paper, and Pelletier has publicly discussed his methodology and findings, which is far more than what Dan has done when he simply asserts that everybody agrees with him. Sauce for the goose is, of course, sauce for the gander. Next is the topic of critical scholarship, and this is going to be a big chunk of my rebuttal because I think a good deal of what Dan says here is not only wrong, but deeply disingenuous and insulting to other scholars. Dan defines a critical scholar as someone who is both willing and able to interrogate the historicity, the fallibility, and the authenticity of the text of the Bible, and not to scholars who are contractually obligated not to do these things. And here, Dan is referring to contractual obligation to refer to many Christian institutions which require their faculty to affirm a statement of faith to teach there. And the implication here is that any scholar who teaches at a university that has a statement of faith is a scholar that is not willing to openly investigate the issues. And this is a deeply uncharitable and disingenuous attitude to have towards his fellow scholars. At its core, this is an ad hominem attack of those who take a position different than Dan's. A statement of faith doesn't require one not to investigate an issue. It simply, as the name suggests, is a statement of one's faith. To insinuate that one can't work at an institution with a statement of faith and also openly investigate the issue is to implicitly imply that anyone who openly investigates these issues would end up contradicting the statement of faith, which is question-begging. Dan also seems to naively think that it's only these schools that have biases and sociological pressures. While it is very well the case that some theologically conservative schools have sociological pressures to affirm certain positions, it's also true that the more theologically liberal institutions have sociological pressures to affirm certain positions. And any person who gets up and claims they are without bias is deceiving not just others, but themselves. Dan said earlier that he doesn't consider Mike Lacona a critical scholar, which implies that Lacona was not willing to openly investigate the issues of the text with the critical mind. However, this is simply false. In Lacona's work on the historical investigation of Jesus, he states early in the work that he made up his mind to investigate these issues as objectively as possible, not in an attempt to affirm his faith, but in an attempt to honestly investigate it. And he admits that there were times in his work when he felt as if he was on a balance beam, able to go either way on the topic. Licona, in his published work, has said things regarding the Gospels that have angered a lot of conservative evangelicals. For instance, Licona has suggested that the resurrection of the dead saints in Matthew didn't really happen, and that this is just rhetorical flair. As a result of this, Licona has faced a world of backlash and has been attacked numerous times by other scholars, with some even trying to effectively expel him from academia. However, Licona has stood by his statements as he thinks that's where the evidence lies. Craig Evans has gotten backlash because he said in a public debate that he doesn't think some statements in John were actually uttered by Jesus. You just hand-wave these guys away, saying they're not critical scholars and they're not willing to openly investigate things. They certainly seem like it to me. Suppose I ask you, Dan, regarding the positions that you've adopted and argued for throughout your doctoral process. Did you adopt those positions because you thought that's where the evidence led, or did you just adopt them because of sociological pressures? I suspect you would say you hold to your positions because you think that's where the data lies. Now, suppose you were working at an institution that said you would have to publicly contradict your position on these topics in order to continue working there. Would you compromise your scholarly integrity and publish arguments for things you think false? Again, though I don't know you well, I think you would say that you would not compromise your integrity as a scholar. My question is this, Dan. If I'm correct in saying that you wouldn't compromise your integrity as a scholar for your employment, why are you so quick to insult and degrade the others in your field by suggesting that they would not do the same? You assume that everybody who holds to a more conservative position and that teaches at a conservative institution is one who has checked their brain at the door and neglected some type of epistemic virtue. Dan assumes that the employment of these scholars is what led them to the positions they hold, when he should consider that it's their positions on these matters that led them to their places of employment. It seems like you have ruled out the possibility that these are good, honest, critical scholars who came to the positions they hold because it's where their reasons guide them, and that they have likewise chosen to work at a university in which they are among like-minded peers and whose mission they agree with. I think that if Dan picked up one of Keener's works, he would see that Keener's reputation in this field is well-deserved. He is meticulously thorough in his investigations. He gives views he disagrees with a thorough and fair shake, and he is cautious not to overstate his case or go where the evidence doesn't lead. I won't continue to hit on this point, but I do want to bring this section to a close with this. Dan, as I'm sure you are aware, there have been people in the comments of our videos who have insulted and disregarded you based on your affiliation with the Church of Latter-day Saints. They have suggested that I need not even respond to you because your affiliation with this institution speaks negatively about your intellectual merits. Now, I think both you and I would agree that those who are making these comments are wrong in doing so. It's not just improper reasoning, it's disingenuous and insulting to you as a person. I want to invite you to consider that the way these people are acting towards you because of your affiliation with your religious institution is in principle no different than the way you are acting towards these other scholars because of the institutions they are affiliated with. I would encourage you to extend the same level of intellectual hospitality to others as you yourself would like to receive. And with that, I will move on to other points in the next part of this video response.